let's first, I guess, wrap up last week. We're now finding out what's in this bill. The Manchin Biden Build Back Better. Hey, we're going to reduce inflation bill. It's not going to reduce inflation. In fact, we now find out some of the things that they couldn't find time to print before they voted on it. It's going to affect everybody's taxes, and I mean everybody's taxes. If you make $30,000 or more a year, your taxes are going up next year. And it's all for this Green New Deal. And Stu has been watching all of it unfold, and I've been watching what's happening with the assault weapons, the AR ban that is now passed in the House, going to the Senate. So let's go through some of them. Let's start with the Build Back Better Manchin bill.
Yeah, this is a bill that it's been an incredible journey on this one because, as we kind of all remember, the Democrats initially wanted $6 trillion of spending through Bernie Sanders at his estimates. The White House came in at, I think, about $3.5 trillion after they whittled it down to try to look like they were being responsible. Both Manchin and Sinema opposed this famously so they could not get to 50 votes, which they need to get to in this particular bill.
Correct.
So they went back and forth a bunch of times. They first lowered it to, I think, 2.1 trillion, then to 1.9 trillion, then to 1.7 trillion. And these numbers are, as you've pointed out multiple times, Glenn, in real depth, not only here, but also on your TV show, that spending number is really a misleading thing to look at because it's much more about what the bill is going to do on the negative side than it is just the spending. But as we've all seen, we spent $1.9 trillion on this COVID bill at the beginning of Biden's presidency, which led to a good chunk of what we're seeing now as far as inflation. So imagine if we had gone ahead with an extra $3.5 trillion that they wanted back in 2021. Now, of course, since then, the Republicans have come on board for $1 trillion of infrastructure spending. Not to mention that many of them were on board with all of the other COVID spending that we had going on. And there was another proposal for $250 billion of spending for this CHIPS Act, which theoretically has some sense behind it, as we've seen what's going on in China and Taiwan. All of our chips are made in Taiwan. We have a major problem with the supply chain. So in theory, you can understand why you talk about this and why it might be a bipartisan issue, even though, again, I don't think this is the right way to approach that problem, but you can understand that the problem exists. So $250 billion was on the table, and Republicans were basically like, look, we, of course, because they always do, will go along with a ton of your spending requests. Republicans do not have a problem with spending.
In fact, we might even add more to your spending in some cases.
Yeah, they usually do. Yeah. And we've seen now this is not the Tea Party era. There's no leadership voice on the right who's arguing for less spending. That's not a position.
No, I would say the Freedom Caucus.
The Freedom Caucus is not in leadership.
They're in exactly
minority status.
You're right. You're right.
So
you're right.
You're right. There's just not really anybody there. So this $250 billion bill is going forward, but Mitch McConnell does not want the Build Back Better thing to happen. He's drawn the line there. For whatever reason, he's drawn the line there on spending, which at least it's drawn somewhere. And he says he doesn't want this. But that 50 vote threshold is still sitting out there. They can do this at any point until this election happens and they leave office, assuming Republicans win the House or the Senate. So it's been sitting out there, and Manchin keeps coming on, and he's off, and he's on, and he's off, and he's on, and he's off. And so finally, the McConnell says, look, I'm not going to go ahead with this $250 billion in CHIPS spending unless you say the Build Back Better thing is done. We're done with this reconciliation thing. We're not going to do it this time. It's over. Right around that time, Joe Manchin comes out and says, gosh darn it. This is over. I will not negotiate anymore. I am done. We have had all these conversations. It's over. Big media splash. Everyone reacts, goes crazy. So McConnell goes to Chuck Schumer and says, hey, Chuckles, I remember when I said I'd go along with you if, of course, you stop the Build Back Better thing. Well, it looks like it's gone, so I'll go along with you on the CHIPS Act. The CHIPS Act goes through. They vote for it. It gets signed literally the next day. Joe Manchin comes out and says, by the way, we've come up with a deal. We have a deal now to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on the reconciliation bill that I just said was dead a few weeks ago. So it all,
Can I ask you a question?
Also goes back to McConnell getting absolutely schooled here by Chuck Schumer.
How do we never learn our lesson? How is it never works out the other way? Why?
You
Why?
get every,
I want to know why.
Every little bit of this you deserve when you do a deal with Chuck Schumer. It is, how can you not know he's going to lie directly to your face at every opportunity?
Kentucky, what is wrong with you? Stop giving us McConnell. Stop it. Stop. He's dirty. He's in bed with the Chinese. He's engaged in nepotism and everything. Stop it. The guy is worthless. Absolutely worthless. It is, I swear to you, he's like a Democratic infiltrator. He's like, I'm going to pose as a Republican, but Chucky, you and me, baby.
You know, look, McConnell, you could certainly say he's done some good things, particularly, I mean, the Supreme Court does not look like it does today without McConnell holding that line.
And
he typically votes, he votes like a Republican.
Like a turtle.
He's not the worst guy. He's not, Adam Kinzinger, right? Like, he's not a guy who's out there constantly voting. Even Susan Collins. He's not that type.
He's the head of the Senate for the Republicans.
Yeah, the power is such a significant part of this. And he's always playing games. And here's a game. You play dangerous games, you get dangerous results. And this is what's happened. So now they've been, again, if you have principle, you just don't vote for the $250 billion thing in the first place. And that's the problem. Right?
Correct.
You say this is a bad idea and we're not going to spend this much money when we're sitting here complaining about inflation every day. How do you have any credibility on a major issue like that when the Republicans have gone almost as much money that was spent on the bill they all complained about from Joe Biden has been spent in multiple different bills, but that the Republicans have signed on to? I mean, they have very little credibility here. Their only hope is that most people don't know the background of this stuff and will think, well, at least they're a little bit better than the Democrats, which I guess they are. But I mean, that gap seems to shrink all the time.
They're just slower. They're just slower at it. And maybe it's because they do have some stops in there, some people who are fighting against it.
Yeah.
Or maybe they're so incompetent that they can't pass the same kind of bills. You know what I mean? Maybe they're all like, yeah, I'm all in. Hey, Marxism, I think it's great. You like Karl Marx? I like Karl Marx. Let's do it. And then they get up and they put bills together. Like, dah. And so the actual Karl Marx, who's in the Democratic Party, steps up and like, these guys are worthless.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just incompetent, and that's the only reason why they're going slower. But they're taking us off a cliff, just the same cliff. The same cliff. You watch. I mean, I think you're going to see after the election, if the Republicans win, which they could screw up.
Mm-hmm. In a big way. I mean, it looks like they're going to screw the Senate up already. I mean, at this point, I don't think it's any better than 50-50 they win the Senate. I
saw that from your favorite website. What is it?
530. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, 530.
Oh God, that's terrifying.
They're saying 50% because they were. In fact, they were. I think at 40% that the Democrats would hold it. Now they're up to, I think, 50 or 60%.
Well, I mean, it's probably a result of things like, the latest poll from Pennsylvania that has, Dr. Oz down double digits. I mean, again, never made any
surprise
against the guy who's barely alive. The man is barely alive, and he's beating Dr. Oz by 11 points.
Democrats don't have a problem with that.
I guess not.
I mean, they could. I mean, you could have, those old pictures where they would kill an outlaw, in the Wild West, and they just prop his body up in a coffin? You could have the Democrats in those pictures, and they would still be voted into office.